You're listening to the OCD Stories podcast, hosted by me, Stuart Ralph. The OCD Stories is a podcast dedicated to raising awareness and understanding around obsessive-compulsive symptoms. I do this through interviewing inspired therapists, psychologists, and people who have experienced OCD. Welcome to the OCD Stories. And welcome to episode 458 of the podcast, and in this one, I chat with Hannah. Hannah has kindly agreed to share her OCD story with us. And in particular, we talk about how OCD manifested for her in childhood, including a fear of rabies, worries around swallowing, worries around her heart stopping, as well as harm, religious and sexual orientation themes of OCD. We discuss other themes such as pOCD and doing exposure response prevention therapy, starting a support group, and much more. Now, in the early part of this episode, you'll hear Hannah's puppy barking away. The puppy does quieten down and then a bit later pops up again, but most of the episode you won't hear the puppy, but just to give you a heads up on that. And thank you to NoCD for supporting the podcast. NoCD offers effective and convenient therapy available in the US and outside the US. To find out more about NoCD, their therapy plans, if they currently take your insurance, or to download their free app, head to go.treatmyocd.com/the OCD stories, or the link will be in the episode description. Thank you to all of our patrons for supporting our work. To sign up to our Patreon and to check out the other benefits you'll receive as a patron, please see the link in the show notes. And thank you to Hannah for her time and story. I really appreciate it. It was really nice chatting to her and hearing her story. It was nice to hear from her puppy too. And of course, thank you to you guys for listening. As always, it means a lot. Without further ado, here is Hannah. Welcome to the podcast, Hannah.
Hi. So glad to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. You know, you listen to the podcast, so you know basically everything I'm going to ask you. So to start with, it'd be good to hear your OCD story.
Yeah. Okay. So, and if you hear a dog barking in the background, he's a puppy and he's separated from me right now.
Okay.
But yeah, so I didn't know I had OCD like most people. I started out kind of like as what my parents would call a hypochondriac. I was 7 and I watched this movie. I remember we were watching, maybe I was 6. We were watching Old Yeller. And when like Old Yeller, I feel like it's like a traditional Disney movie about a dog. And after we watched it, I was just like, oh my gosh, like what is like, they didn't say rabies in the movie. They called it hydrophobia, which is like the old technical term for it. And I was like, oh my gosh, like what if our dog contracts like hydrophobia? And then what if I get it? And what if my brother gets it? And so I went to bed that night and I just like couldn't sleep. I just kept playing over and over and over. What if like we all go crazy? What if we all go crazy because of this disease that my dog does not have, but I have no idea. I've just watched Old Yeller. So I started like replaying that over and over and over. And then I couldn't sleep for like days. I kept crying to my parents. I'm like, we're all going to contract hydrophobia. And they're like, rabies? And I'm like, yes. And they're like, no. Like our dog's vaccinated for it. And I was like, no. But like, what if? Like, what if she gets it? And then we all get it. So like this goes on for a long time. And then it starts developing into like not just like rabies, but other things. So family members and like older family members would get like cancer or had like COPD, diseases that you can't contract, virally. And so I was like, oh my goodness, I have cancer. Like I know I have cancer. If my stomach hurt, I was like, it has to be cancer. When I was a kid, I would like feel my stomach and like muscle feels really weird. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, that's a bump. Like that has to be a tumor. And my mom's like, no, like you don't have a tumor. You don't have cancer. You're okay. And like, I would have them check my temperature, like go to the doctor all the time. I'd call out of school because I was just like, I'm sick. I know I'm sick. And it was so anxiety provoking. And then the first big one would have been like bigger OCD stuff. Like that definitely was, but no one really knew. And like, they just chalked it up to like, she's a hypochondriac. She's scared of everything. We were watching the movie The Incredibles. So I would have been like 3rd or 4th grade. We were watching The Incredibles and I had a panic attack in the theater well, I've never seen the movie to this day. But I had a panic attack. I was like, I can feel my breathing. I can feel like my blinking and my breathing and my swallowing, and something's wrong. Like I'm gonna forget how to breathe, or like I'm so concentrated on it. And I was like, Mom, I have to go to the bathroom. Like I'm dying. I think I'm dying. And she was just like, what? And I'm like, no, this is it. This is gonna be. I'm signing out tonight because I can't breathe. And they took me to the bathroom, and she was like, what is going on? And I was like, I don't know. And like, I'm hyperventilating. I'm like 8. And they're freaking out. My parents are panicking because they're just like, what is going on with her? And my dad, he's pretty level most of the time. So he was like, hey, it's okay. You're okay. And so that went on for a minute. I started having like fears of chewing. So if I didn't chew food correctly and swallowed it like correctly, I would think I'm going to choke. So I was very in tune to my body's sensations, which ended up leading to me losing a ton of weight. Like, and I was 8, so I would have already been very thin anyways. But I lost a lot of weight, and the doctors were like, she's severely underweight. We think she has an eating disorder. And my parents are like, oh my gosh. So they're thinking, I have an eating disorder at 8 years old. And I'm like, no, I just don't like how food feels when I swallow it. I'm scared I'm going to choke. My dad still remembers that I would chew mashed potatoes. He's like, I've never seen someone chew mashed potatoes as many times as you did. And I'm like, I'm telling you, like, that's just like what I did. Like, and then they took me to a therapist then. And they were like, it's really good to just use humor to cope with stuff like this, to try to make it lighter, especially at that age. And they said, I had severe anxiety. And so one of the other things is like, I'm scared my heart's going to stop. And so I would put my hand over my heart all the time at this age. And we'd be going through the grocery store, and I would just have my hand over my heart. And so since the therapist had coped with it with humor a little bit, my dad would be like, oh, are we saying the Pledge of Allegiance today? Like, is that what we're doing in the grocery store? And he would just like start saying the Pledge of Allegiance in the grocery store. And I'm like, oh, ha, 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 like, you're funny. And then we would laugh and it would be over. But he was like my main reassurance seeking at that time. And so I would call him if I felt super nervous, or I'm like, hey, I think something's wrong. I think I have cancer. I think this, I think that. The next theme that popped up was a harm theme. And so I would have been still in grade school. And again, I was a nervous child, not knowing I had OCD. Everybody just like, she has anxiety. So I was waiting for my parents to fall asleep, or waiting for my parents to not fall asleep, to stop watching a movie because they thought I was asleep. And so they were watching a horror film, and I was like, oh, I don't want to disturb them because they're going to be so sad that I'm not asleep. So I like waited until their film was over. While I'm waiting for the film to be over, I'm also watching the film. And they have no idea. So I think it was like a Friday 13th or so. I don't know. It was very scary for a child. And I remember like I'm pretty sure it was Friday 13th or something like that, because it was like stabbing was involved. And so I saw that, and I'm like, oh, I don't like that. Like, that's so terrifying. So I run back to my room, and I'm like, oh, they're going to be so mad if they find out I watched that. So I didn't say anything at first. And then I started playing, oh my gosh, like, what if I accidentally kill my parents? And I'm like, wait, that's weird. And as a kid, we had rules about, like what you could use in the kitchen. And so the only knife I was allowed to use at that age was a butter knife anyways. So this is where like OCD kind of cracks me up a little bit, because I was like telling my self, don't touch the butter knives. Do not touch the butter knives. Whatever you do, don't touch the butter knives. And I sat on that for probably about like a few days or maybe a week. And it was just so much anxiety that I was just like, this is so much. So one night my mom was working out. They put us to bed, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. I have to tell her that I'm scared I'm going to like murder the whole family in my sleep. And so I run into her, and I'm sobbing, I'm crying, and she's like, what is wrong? Like, I viscerally remember her doing sit-ups, like she was doing her thing. And she was like, what is going on? And I'm like, I'm so scared that I'm going to hurt you. And I'm like, hurt me? And I was like, yes, I'm scared if I go to sleep, I'm going to sleepwalk. I'm going to go into the kitchen and I'm going to get the butter knives and I'm just going to take out the whole family. And she was like, what? And so she's like, oh my gosh, they're going to lock her up. And so then I'm panicking even more. She has no idea what's happening. Then my dad hears the commotion and he comes in and my mom tells him what I've told him. And he was like, oh, that's no big deal. No big deal. You're 7 years old. We can take you. Not a big problem. But he's like, no, you don't mean that. Like, that's just, you're just a little nervous and that's okay. So then they really upped the ante on the therapy. Like, they downplayed it for me, but they were like, what in the world is going on with this girl? And so they take me to a psychologist and they do all the testing. And the psychologist again is like, hey, she just has really, really bad anxiety, with like some kind of dark thoughts, but we're going to put her on medication. She's going to be great. And that was kind of like it. My parents, they've come a long way with mental health as I progressed through life, but like at that point, that just wasn't something talked about in my family. And so they put me on medication. Again, I didn't like swallowing pills. Like, swallowing was still a weird thing. So like I wasn't good at taking medication anyways. Like I would cry, wasn't consistent. So I don't think it really did anything for me. And then they kind of gave up with it. They were like, this is too much for like this kid to take a teeny tiny pill. And so then later it turned into like, I remember I had suicidal OCD for a while. Like I was scared I was going to accidentally kill myself. Like I'm like, we lived in East Tennessee. And so a lot of mountains, it's beautiful. The terrain is gorgeous. And we were a very active family. And so we'd go hiking. We'd, go to cliffs. We live like right next to Dollywood. And so I was just like, oh my gosh, like what if I go up to the top of this roller coaster and just jump? Or what if I'm on a mountain and I just jump? And like that would, so like I had this massive fear of, don't go to the edge. Do not go to the edge. You will be safe backwards. And like, I couldn't enjoy anything. I'm like, I wasn't really telling anyone these thoughts because I'm like, okay, well, they already like semi know that I'm like a little loony. So I'm just going to keep this one to myself. And it just kind of kept spiraling, to then it kind of transferred into a religious OCD, which was really odd because we're not like a religious family. We grew up in the Bible Belt, and my dad is agnostic. My mom grew up Southern Baptist, but we weren't like practicing people that go to church. And so, but all of my friends did go to church, and so when there was vacation Bible school or like weekend trips, my mom would sign us up because she was like, hey, free childcare, that's great. And they get to hang out with their friends. Like, what better thing you could do? So we would go to like Bible school or weekend trips or whatever. And we were at one in middle school and it was a weekend trip. I think I was in sixth grade, and they started talking about hell, which I feel like is a very heavy topic anyways, for a young kid. But especially one who's not used to these kind of conversations of hell. Like, I'm like, wow, that sounds really scary. So I was like, they're saying, hey, if you don't want to go to hell, you need to get saved. And so immediately I'm like, oh, this sounds great. Sign me up. Like, I don't want to go to that place. So I sign up. And then the next night, the guy's like, if you're only being saved because you want to avoid hell, you're going to go to hell anyways. Like, you're a bad person. So then I'm like, oh my gosh, I've done this all wrong. And immediately start thinking, I'm going to go to hell. I'm going to die, which again is not even something that like we were taught as kids. But I think I was like, I've done this wrong. I've done all these steps wrong. My entire family is going to go to hell. So I like, when I get back from camp, actually back up real quick. I have a panic attack at camp. And I tell the youth lady, I'm like, I'm so scared I'm being saved because I just want to avoid hell. And I'm doing this completely wrong. And I don't want to go to hell, but I'm also pretty sure I'm going to go anyways. And now I don't know what to do. And I'm panicking and I'm sobbing. And this lady is just like, oh, okay, we're going to take you to the main guy over this camp. So they take me to the main preacher and I sit with him and I tell him everything. I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I did this wrong. And I feel really, really guilty about this now. And I'm pretty sure I've tricked God into everything about me. And he's just like, oh, you know what? When we're going to do what's called an altar call. And we're going to, in front of everybody, you're going to get up here and you're going to profess everything you just said. And I'm like, okay, yeah. And that's going to make me good with the big man. Like, that's good, right? And he's just like, absolutely. And I'm like, I think I can do that. And I'm like 11 or 12 or whatever. And in front of like 300 people, he's like, Hannah, get up here and tell me exactly what you've told me. And I was just like, okay. So I did. And everyone's just like staring at me. And then I'm crying because it's kind of traumatic. And then also, like I'm having a panic attack as I'm doing this. And then I go home and tell my family, my mom and dad are livid. Like they're like, what did they make you do? And I'm like, no. Like we're good now. Like I've saved the family. I've saved everybody. Like I'm good now. And they're like, no. So kind of like definitely backed off that church camps. But I had a thing of like calling my dad because I knew he was agnostic. I kind of wrote my mom off as she's okay. She grew up Southern Baptist, but my dad, I know he's not. So I'd call him. He used to work out of state a lot. I'd be like, hey dad, have you looked into this whole Christianity thing? And he was like, sure, okay, yeah, for you, sure. And I'm like, okay, good, because I really need you to look into this. And then I'm like, so we ended up moving to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and that was a huge shift for me. I was in seventh grade. No girl in middle school likes themselves in seventh grade. Like it is the hardest year of your life. And then my family up and we moved states. And you're going through puberty. I had nobody I knew there. And so I was already like really struggling. And then sexual orientation OCD spiked. So I was watching the show. I was sick and I was watching the show All That with Amanda Bynes, and her dad in one episode kissed another man. And I was like, well, that's weird. And then didn't think much about it for like 30 minutes. But it kept playing over and over and over in my head. And I was like, that's weird. Why am I thinking about that? Well, it just kept going over. And I was like, oh my gosh, what does that mean about me? What if this? What if that? And immediate blood rush, another panic attack, which at this point I didn't know is really more anxiety, not panic attacks. But I'm just like, oh my gosh, like my blood is boiling, my chest is exploding. I need to tell my mom right now. And she had not left for work at this point. So I run in there and I tell her exactly what I'm thinking. And she's like, I don't think that's valid about you, but if it was, who cares? And I'm like, no, but I need to figure this out like right now. Like, what does this mean about me? And she was like, I don't think anything, like, and I'm like, no. Like we need to get to the bottom of this. And that was really like it. Like it wasn't it for me, but it was kind of it for them. Like they were just like, oh, you're fine, whatever. And I'm just like, okay. So I continue with the SOCD, which again, I don't know if that's what this is at this point. For a long time, I remember my first boyfriend in high school. I was in love with this boy, right? Like he was so gorgeous. And we actually moved back to Tennessee 2 years later. So like I knew him, but we were friends. And then when I moved back, he was like, oh my gosh, you're back. And I'm like, yes, I am. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this, like, I don't know if you like Twilight was really big during this time. So I'm like, I am Kristen Stewart right now. And this is going to be my Robert Pattinson. Like I am Bella and Edwarding right now. So, big nerd, but however, he was really interested in me. And I was like, this is incredible. So we started dating, and he was like the first boy that like I kissed and everything. And, we were kissing one night. And I just had the SOCD thought. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, what if I don't even like him? What if I'm tricking him into liking me because I'm just in denial? As we're kissing, and my blood spiked so much that I stopped, looked at him, and threw up right beside him. And I was like, oh my God, what is going on? And so he was like, oh, you okay? Like he was really nice about it. But I was like, I'm pretty sure I have this stomach virus. I didn't want to tell him I'm having a anxiety attack, and I can't tell him why because I'm like, you're gonna think I'm crazy. So I threw up beside him, and I'm like, this is not good. This is not good. And then I didn't even tell my mom. Like he so kind. He was so kind. He helped me clean it up. And then I was like, Mom, he needs to go home. I don't feel well. And he didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. My mom never knew that I threw up because I was just like, this is so embarrassing. Like this is the end of my freshman year of high school as I know it. This is it. But he never said anything about it. And we continued dated on and off throughout high school. But these thoughts kept coming up over and over. They were super distressing. Um, but I just kept, I don't want to say dealing with it. I did a lot of magical thinking, and this is going to sound so strange, but, and I didn't know it was magical thinking, but from childhood through high school, um, besides seeking reassurance, specifically from my dad, I would I would restate over and over and over addresses. So if I wasn't going to kill my family, if I could say addresses, I wasn't going to commit suicide. If I could say addresses, I'm not getting cancer. If I could say an address. And I mean, like, it was to the point where I knew so many addresses that like, it was bizarre. So I had to like mine, all my grandparents, aunts and uncles, and I would say them over and over and over. My parents would just be like, this girl's like really, she's like a phone book. Like, this is great. Filling out Christmas cards is going to be very nice because she knows all the addresses. Um, that in my mind, I was like, okay, I'm not going to go crazy if I can say X, Y, Z. And it was really weird. I didn't know why I was doing that, but it was very soothing in the moment. And then the thought would come back up, and I would just keep saying addresses, phone numbers. When I got really good at addresses and that wasn't working, I started adding in phone numbers to these. Like I'd be like, okay, this is my address, this is my phone number, this is like my parents' phone numbers, my siblings, my grandparents, everyone. Because as everyone with OCD knows, compulsions only work for so long, and then you got to figure out, like, it stops giving that little relief. So I just kept adding to like these rituals. So fast forward, I'm in grad school. I go through a really, really big breakup in grad school, and I'm just like, distraught. This would have been probably 2018. So I knew I had anxiety. I am not diagnosed with OCD at this point. So I started having pOCD. And that was the tipping point for me. Like, I had never experienced anything like this. Like, they were all awful, awful, awful. But this one was like the worst of the worst in my head. Like, I'm just like, this one is, I didn't know what OCD was. So I'm just like, I'm going to go crazy. Like, this is awful. I had a dream. And it just started this whole thing of me. I'm thinking about it when I wake up. I'm thinking about it when I go to bed, when I'm taking tests. I'm in grad school. Like, I was scared to death my grades were going to suffer. I had a full ride for grad school. And so I was just like, I'm going to lose everything. My life is going to be over. And at this point, like, I kept, like, in 2 weeks time, like, my life quality had like diminished so much from these thoughts. Like, I couldn't get rid of them. I kept thinking like, what if, like, I go to the park and something happens, or like, what if I get, like, I didn't know the groinal arousal was a thing at this point. And so anytime, like, I didn't want to be around children. I didn't want to be around anything. Like, I was just so distraught. And in grad school, I was teaching a lot of kids at this point, not like young kids, but still like college, like freshmen and sophomores. And like, something that I loved so much was starting to be taken away from me. Because I was just like, if I'm having these thoughts, I must be crazy. Like, and so to the point where I was looking up, like I need to go get institutionalized or something, like something's really, really wrong with me. And then I started having actual suicidal thoughts because I was just like, I can't live like this. Like, this is awful. And so I Googled, unwanted thoughts. Like, I don't want these thoughts. They're awful. Like, I hate this. And so I was just like, I need to figure this out. And the website Intrusive Thoughts, this was before they were made
made of millions.
Yeah.
It popped up. And I was like, well, that sounds interesting, intrusive thoughts, because it definitely doesn't feel like I like it. So I clicked on it, and they actually had all of like these OCD themes. And it was so surreal for a minute, like looking to see, yes, it had pOCD, but it also had like all the other ones. And I was just like, wait a minute, like my life is kind of starting to make a little more sense, but I'm like, no, OCD is like cleanliness and contamination and, whatever. Like maybe I had it when I was little, but I've definitely outgrown it.
Mm.
And so I started Googling OCD therapists, because I was just like, okay, well, I'm going to tell a therapist and see if he thinks that it's OCD or if I'm crazy. And if he thinks I'm crazy, I'm checking myself into a mental institution. Like I had one picked out. Like, I'm like, it's fine. I'm going to take the danger away from everybody. Like, I can't do this anymore. Obviously, I'm a threat to society. Like, I need to just be locked away forever and ever. And I went to that guy. His name was Ben, and he was an OCD therapist. And it was the most, like, I don't want to say traumatic, but like such a scary moment to tell somebody that like I'm having scary thoughts about. And I'm like, hey, this is going to sound really weird, and I am totally okay if you want to call the police after I tell you this, but something's really wrong with me. And he just looks, and he, not laughing at me, he laughs, and he's like, you're totally normal. This is OCD textbook. You definitely check all the boxes. Like, you are clinical OCD. And he was like, have you ever, had these other thoughts, or, is this just kind of like new? And I was like, okay, actually no, because I'm like looking at this intrusive thought site, and I'm checking all of these boxes, and it's just really weird that my life kind of makes some sense now. But like, I just kind of need you to tell me, do I need to go to this institution, or can you kind of help me with this? Because I don't know what to do. And he did. He was my first OCD therapist. He was who I needed at the moment. He was very compassionate. I was in grad school, and my parents at this point, they, again, were somewhat on the mental health train at this right then. And so they did not want to pay. They didn't know what was going on, but they also didn't want to like continuously pay, because I'm like, hey, I need the copay money. I had no money. And they're just like, when are you going to get better? Like, this guy just sounds like he's taking your money. Like, when are you going to get better? When are you getting better? And I was like, well, there's not a cure for this. Like right now, there probably never will be, but I'm just learning how to cope and deal with these thoughts. And they're like, this is just too much. You're going to have to figure that out. And I told Ben, I was like, hey, Ben, like, I don't know if I can continue like seeing you. Like, my parents want me to get better kind of immediately, and I don't think I'm going to right now, because this is a lot of heavy content. And he was like, oh, you know what? We'll put you on sliding scale. We'll do a $0 copay and we'll let your insurance do the rest. And I'm just like, are you serious? So I owe him like so much. Like, he was fabulous to me, but he didn't, I saw him for about 2 years. He didn't push me enough with the ERP. He let me talk a lot, and he would let me do a lot of reassurance seeking. And he was so, so nice. Like, he's exactly who I needed in that moment, but he wasn't the person that like was going to throw me off in the deep end and hope I swim. Like, that was, and like knowing I could swim. He just wasn't going to do that for me. And I started realizing that back, I think it was been in 2020. I started dating my now fiance. And my current fiance, side note, we've been best friends since we were 5. I've known him my entire life. He was my best friend on the kindergarten playground. I forced him to be my boyfriend in 1st grade. And then he was my first little boyfriend in 6th grade. He was the first person to contact me and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're back in Tennessee, when we moved back from Alabama. Like, he's just been in my life the entire time. My dad used to call us Ross and Rachel from Friends. So he's just like such a pillar in my life. So in 2020, he texted me, and we were friends, but he texted me and was like, hey, like I saw you're in Knoxville, which is where he was living at the time. Um, COVID sucks, right? Like, do you want to like hang out? I need help with a website design. And my master's degree was in digital marketing. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is going to be my big break. Um, and it ended up being just a ploy to hang out. He really did not need help with the website design. He wanted to go get tacos and to go margaritas, and it was so fun. But then I got a call from my current employer saying, hey, we would love for you to work with us. We would love for you to move to Charlotte, North Carolina. And so I tell my fiance, I'm like, I am going to be moving to Charlotte, North Carolina because I I we weren't like exclusive at that point, and I was like, I'm not putting my life on hold for a boy. Like, you're so cool, you're my best friend. If this is meant to be, we can do the commute. Like, and if it's not, totally cool. We can always be best friends. We started doing long distance, and my OCD is just like, okay, we're going to attack your relationship. I had really bad, then again, XO OCD and ROCD, and I never had relationship OCD. But like, I was just like, this is wild. Like, this is crazy. And that's at the point when I was just like telling my old therapist, I was like, hey, Ben, like, you're incredible. You've been incredible to me, but I need somebody to push me. And so I signed up for no CD. And I ended up getting a therapist named Kelsey. She was incredible. Like, I cannot tell you how much I just loved her. She pushed me so hard. We did like some crazy exposures, and I was not used to exposures at this point, like not to the level that like Kelsey let me get them. Because again, Ben let me complain and seek reassurance about OCD a little bit more than Kelsey ever would have let me. And so when we did our intake, she said, okay, we're going to make like a tier of, your current themes, and we're going to do some crazy exposures, and we're going to work our way up. And I'm like, okay, great. And so we would start out by like writing down like trigger words. We would make scripts. And I got really good at them. I would go to the gym, and like I had written a script and recorded myself talking, and I would go to the gym and like listen to it over and over and over to try to provoke anxiety, to be like able to sit in that uncomfortable state in public. And I got really good at it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I am killing it. Like, I am killing it. Like, this is great. My OCD is not a problem. I am the best at this. And so she was just like, and she took it to another level where it was like, she would send me articles that she knew would scare me out of the blue, like in the no CD chat. Like, she would be like, hey, this looks like a good article for you to read right now. And I'm like, oh, you are good. You are good. And yeah, that was a really good test because I was not prepared to be triggered, and which is what her goal was trying to do. But yeah, I was not prepared to be triggered. I would read it, definitely a little spike, but not anything like it had been. It would like that fear in my chest had started to diminish so much. My blood wouldn't get extremely hot the second I saw something that was triggering. And so, she was like, I think we can start taking this down to just like check-ins, like you're doing incredible. And I had moved to Charlotte. I had moved back to Tennessee about in 2021, because the company I worked for, we went remote. And at the time we got to go like permanently remote. And so I'm like, well, I'm going to move back home because like Hayes and I, we're doing so amazing in this relationship. We're doing long distance. Like, he's traveling 4 hours every weekend to come see me. Like, obviously, like, he really likes me. So I'm going to move back, and I still get to keep my job. I can still be a badass and do the corporate life and kind of have like a little romantic life. And so I moved to Johnson City, and he's in Knoxville. So it's still about an hour and a half commute, but like, yeah, we were not at the stage where we were like, let's move in together. Like, I didn't want to rush it because he had been my best friend. So we're taking it like, slow-ish. And then we ended up moving in together in, I want to say beginning maybe of 2022, we moved in together. we lived together for a year, and then he gets a call from his employer saying, like, we're going to do layoffs. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Like, that's fine. We can do that. And so I'm like, hey, you should totally look in Charlotte, because I have like a strong feeling that my company is going to ask us to go back in the office, because like at this point, COVID's kind of still a problem, but more and more people are starting to go back in the office. And I'm like, I just have like an inkling we're going to go back in the office. And he ends up finding a job within like less than a month. And it was the best decision ever. We ended up moving to Charlotte again, together this time. And we had a house on the lake. We rented it. We were not financially able to afford that, but we rented it, and it was great. It was the coolest thing ever. We loved it. And my life was going so well. And then I started having a little more like OCD thoughts. And I was just like, this is not fun. What's going on? Like, my life is perfect right now. Like, I have this incredible person by my side. And I just moved to my dream city again with him. And we have 2 dogs, and like, we're doing great. Like, this is great. What's going on here? And so I got back with an OCD, and I had to get a new therapist because we were in North Carolina now. And her name was Tammy, and Tammy was so sweet. Like, loved her. And we would chat and do like some exposures and stuff, but it wasn't like subsiding a little bit as much. Like, it wasn't bad, but it was also still like, pretty present. So then in October, Hayes and I went to the pumpkin patch. It just was like a cute little October day, and we were taking photos, and I looked really, really swollen. And I'm like, dude, like, have I gained like a ton of weight? I look swollen. Like, this is weird. And that night I started bleeding out. Like, I went anemic, and I just started like TMI, but I started passing like a lot of blood, and I'm just like, hey, something's wrong with me. So I go to the hospital, Hayes and I go to the hospital, and they admit me, and they have no idea what's going on. They're just like, your vitals are insane. You're losing so much blood. Like, this is not good. This is not good. And I'm like, I had Hayes step out of the room, and I tell the nurses, I'm like, do not tell him that if I'm about to go, do not tell him, because I did not want him to stress out. And they're like, he'll be fine if he needs to know something. I'm like, no. Like, I just like want him to be in bliss. So I'm like, he's the best person ever. Like, like, no. And because I'm just like, I'm fine. Like, I'll be fine. I'll be fine. And so Hayes is like, like, you're not fine. You need to listen to what they're doing. And so I'm stuck in the hospital for a week. And one night I had a dream, and my OCD attacked like hard. Like, this was like, excluding the pOCD, like, this was like awful. And I'm stuck in a hospital by myself because Hayes would come in through the day and work at the hospital and just like sit with me. But like at night, like, we needed him to go home to go take care of the dogs. And we didn't have any family. We had just moved here. Like, it was chaotic. And so I was sitting in the hospital, and I was just like, I think I'm dying. What if I lose Hayes? What if I lose everything that's like going so well? What if I just ruin my life somehow? And I called Tam, or actually I emailed Tammy, and she's like, hey, let me call you. And I'm like sobbing in the bathroom of the hospital in my like room. And I'm like, I am not well. And she was like, well, no, like, your body is like not, it's like shutting down. Like, I don't think OCD needs to be like your main concern. And I'm like, no, forget the body thing. Like, I need to solve this right now. And so like at that point, I kind of knew like the OCD was like back. Like, I wasn't like practicing my exposures at that point. And it was back in full swing. And on top of that, like, I'm trapped, like, with nothing. So Tammy ends up calling the hospital and is like, hey, give her like some anxiety, panic attack medicine, something to give her relief while she's literally like, her body is fighting whatever's going on. So they did, and that was good. But like, it didn't help the OCD after I left the hospital. I ended up being okay. And I get out of the hospital. And it just like was not going well mentally. And so Tammy, again, super, super sweet, but she was also somebody who let me ask for reassurance, not pushing me with ERP. And as much as like I loved getting the reassurance because it helped my anxiety in those like little moments, it wasn't helping long term, and I knew that. So I told her, I was like, hey, I think I'm gonna try like an OCD outpatient treatment. Just to see like if that's gonna help at all. Because my work is struggling. I feel like I'm struggling, like, and it was so frustrating because I had a lot going on in life. Not only not only was I in the hospital, but I had just started a second master's degree. I had been promoted to a new team at my company. Again, we had just moved to North Carolina. Hayes and I were killing it in our relationship. I mean, like everything was going so well, and so like it was just so frustrating. And I'm like, I need like no one understands what's going on. Like why is my OCD spiking? And I think it's just because I'm not being pushed hard enough because I'm a stubborn girl. So my OCD has to be just stubborn. And so I went to another OCD treatment and found my current therapist, Victoria. And Victoria is a no nonsense kind of therapist. And that's exactly what I needed. She pushed and pushed. And we were from October to, I would say, February of this year. Yeah, we worked really, really hard. And I was in a really dark place again with OCD. Like I wasn't eating, I couldn't eat, I was losing weight. Hayes was so supportive. Like he went to a couple of therapy sessions. He doesn't know like everything about my OCD thoughts because the therapists have all challenged me to be like, don't tell him because you're asking for reassurance. So you can tell him you're in a bad spot with OCD, but like he needs to be able to hold you accountable. So he would go to therapy sessions with me just to get like some tips on like how to be supportive. He made little games. I used to ask him for like reassurance. I would just randomly be like, oh my gosh, like I love you so much. And he was like, oh, why are you saying that? Like, that sounds like an OCD compulsion. Because I would just say it out of the blue. And it became a game between him and Victoria, my current therapist, of like, you know, you can only say it so many times. Like, so you can only say 3 I love yous a day. And he would count them. Like he would be like, oh, you used 2 and 1 in the morning. Like, wow, how are you going to make it through the night? And it started becoming kind of funny again. And she would have me do like some harder exposures. And then by February, things were like looking so up. But then OCD was great. OCD is starting to be fantastic. But I had also been dealing with like, I guess, body dysmorphia and maybe like, I guess like binge eating throughout my entire life. And Victoria started noticing it more and more. She was like, hey, I think like you need help with this. That's not my specialty. Like, I think you need to see somebody who's an expert in like, you know, diet culture issues, body imaging issues. And she recommended to a therapist who ended up being like incredible. They specialize in intuitive eating, and that changed my life. They hooked me up with like a dietitian who was also involved in intuitive eating, and it just made a lot of sense. I didn't realize that OCD had a lot of co-occurrences with other mental issues or mental like conditions. And so I definitely checked all the boxes for like an almost eating disorder. Like they wouldn't classify it as an active eating disorder, but she was like, you definitely have body dysmorphia. And we're going to teach you how to re-eat and unlearn diet culture because you grew up in the 2000s and that's just not even fair. And then the first session I had with the intuitive eating coach, she was like, hey, I think you may also have ADHD. You're like a form of like autism. And I was like, what? No. Like my whole family has ADHD. I'm nothing like them. Like I have structure. I take notes. I have list on list on list. Like I am by the books. I'm a rule follower. And she's like, yeah, well, you're a rule follower because you have anxiety. And she's like, I'm pretty sure you have ADHD, but like, I can't diagnose you. So you need to go see somebody like a psychologist to get diagnosed. So I was like, well, that would be so interesting. So like going through all the mental health stuff that I had, I'm now like super fascinated with it. And I immediately booked a psychology appointment, got tested, came back, severe ADHD. And I'm like, what? Like, no way, no way. And they're like, yeah, like you definitely have ADHD. And I'm like, this is insane. And it came back, I had obviously ADHD. Her screening said I have obsessive compulsive tendencies. And then I think it was called like atypical onset depression. I'm pretty sure that's what it was like, something like that, where if I let any of the other conditions that I have affect or like go on for too long without any treatment, I have onset depression, which made so much sense. Like, I definitely have been depressed before, but like never out of the blue. Like, it's always occurred with either an OCD spike or something else going on. And so that was just so cool to see my brain breakdown, and everything started clicking in my life. Like, everything just made even more sense than it did when I got diagnosed with OCD. Like, now I'm like, okay, I have OCD. ADHD explains a lot of this other stuff that's going on in my life. And now I've got the body imaging like starting to get fixed. And this is incredible. Like, it has just been the most interesting ride, I guess. I still deal with OCD, not to the level that I have since the October, January spike. Like, I've definitely gone through like some meta OCD, which has been pretty interesting. I didn't know that was a thing, and Victoria's helped me with that. But I've recently graduated from OCD therapy, which has been so cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, she's like, you can book appointments as needed. Hayes and I recently got engaged back in August, and I had a little spike there because, of course, my body can't tell the difference between excitement and happiness versus danger. And then when it clicks, like, oh, this is a weird feeling. OCD tends to spike a little bit there, but I have like all the resources I need to challenge that. Instead of like, going through compulsions. One of my bigger compulsions as of the past, I would say 4 years, has been researching. I research, do I have OCD? I take a lot of OCD tests. And that was something Victoria recognized pretty quickly. She was like, yeah, that's a compulsion. And I'm like, no. Like, I'm just confirming I have OCD. She's like, yeah, no, that's a compulsion. And so I have not done that in a long time. Except for when we got engaged, Tay saw me looking up like just OCD posts on Instagram, like on the AI feed. And he was like, hey, I'm pretty sure you're doing a compulsion. And I'm like, oh, I am. And I'm so sorry. And he's like, don't apologize. Just stop doing it. And I'm like, this is great. This is why we work. Like, this is why we work. But yeah, it's been a lot of craziness. Also, like, to each his own, medication has been a game changer for me. I've been on Lexapro, and then I went on Prozac, and then I actually saw a psychiatrist who specialized in OCD, and she was like, you need to go on Luvox. For me and my body personally, Luvox has been the best OCD medicine for me. I'm obsessed with it. It's great. I can tell a huge difference. So yeah, I'm on Luvox. Let's see. Yeah, OCD spikes have not been bad at all. And now I'm recently trying to start a support group in Charlotte. Nice. For people who deal with like the taboo OCD themes. So it's not active yet. I have a wait list. I'm trying to get one more person to sign up. But we're going to actually use the plan when I get this OCD support group started is to use the Kimberly Quinlan workbook.
Cool.
Because I feel like with the taboo thoughts, it's probably like one of the hardest things is like the acceptance and like
self-compassion.
Yeah, like that's not something you think about when you're having the thoughts. You're thinking you're like, I'm such a bad person. I'm ruining lives. I'm ruining my life. And I think that like that's such a great workbook. It helped me a lot when I was like going through it. And so yeah, I was talking to my OCD therapist. And I was like, I have to start a support group. Like, I think this would be so impactful. So it's getting semi-going. It's kind of a newer-ish thing. But yeah, we're working through it. I'm excited. I'm just like, hey, it would be really cool for me to help somebody through my experiences that were living hell. I came out better for it, and you will too. You just need to keep on keeping on, keep ERP in.
Yeah, that's it. Well, look, thank you so much for sharing your stories. Tons of detail there, which is awesome. And I'm glad it was obviously a bit of a windy road, but I'm glad, you got some answers and some effective treatments. So thinking about, you kind of said it there a bit anyway, but words of hope, what would you tell people listening that are maybe feeling they're in a bad place?
Probably keep on going. Like someone needs to hear your story, which I think is, I listen to this podcast, especially when I'm like in the thick of OCD and I'm like, it sucks going through it, but you're not normal. Like somebody needs to hear your story and how positive things are, even in the thick of OCD. There's always something good coming. So just keep going and keep practicing ERP, keep taking medication if that's your journey, keep trying. And there's not a cure, but you'll be better for it if you just keep practicing what you're taught in therapy.
Yeah. Good words. Good words. And let's say you had a billboard. What would you want written on that billboard?
Ooh, okay. Yeah. I think it would probably be something like, your value isn't determined by your thoughts. I think that's probably what I would do. Because I put a lot of pressure on myself with my thoughts. And that's something I think my therapists have always said is like, but that doesn't define your value. Yeah. So I think I'd be like, your value isn't determined by your thoughts.
Yeah, I like that. And if people want to join your support group, is there a link they can go to for the wait list?
So I'll send it to you. I have an email. People right now are just like emailing me, signing up for it. It's also featured on the International OCD website. Cool. It's going to be an in-person one for like the Charlotte metro area. But yeah, if anyone's listening from Charlotte, come and hang out. Like I've got a really cool idea ready to go. And we've also got, Victoria has helped me get like a ton of like resources in place for anybody who needs support. I think I have like NoCD linked on the little flyer I can send you, but I'm excited for it. I wish like there would have been a support group in my area, like an in-person one. When I was going through pOCD, SOCD, harm, OCD, I think that would have been really cool to talk to somebody else to make sure, you're not alone and
100%
share experiences.
Yeah, true. Well, awesome. Well, I'll, send me that and I'll put it in the show notes for anyone listening. But in the last sort of minute, is there anything else you wish you could have said today?
No, I think I covered about everything I could think of. I'm a talker. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. Your podcast has just been a game changer for myself. I know for everyone else. So it's like really appreciate everything you're doing for the community.
Yeah, my pleasure. I appreciate you listening over the years, and I'm glad you got to where you wanted to be, and obviously good luck in your onwards journey, and thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for listening to this week's podcast, and thank you to our Patreons who helped make this episode possible. And if you would like to find out more about Patreon and the rewards and benefits, then there will be a link in the episode description. If you enjoy the OCD Stories podcast and would like to support us, please subscribe and rate the show wherever you listen to the podcast. And thank you to NoCD for supporting our work. If you want to find out more about NoCD, head to go.treatmyocd.com/the OCD Stories or click the link in the episode description. And quick disclaimer, guys, this podcast is not therapy. It is not a replacement for therapy. Please seek treatment from a trained professional. And until we speak, take care.